Knowing who pays first between Medicare and other coverage that you may have can make the difference between spending thousands of dollars, being subject to late enrollment penalties, and not. So it's very important to know who's paying first, and the types of coverage that you can have from a retiree plan or employer and how they all work together. So we'll get into it right here. So I'm going to go over a few different situations or scenarios for Medicare and other coverage. So the first one, simple one, is you have retiree coverage, right? And from a former employer, who's paying first, right? Medicare or your retiree coverage. And this could also determine whether you need to even sign up for parts of original Medicare or original Medicare altogether. So number one, again, Medicare is paying first. Whenever you have a retiree plan, the retiree coverage is always going to pay second. Okay. The next scenario, large employer coverage. So what is meant by large employer group coverage in Medicare's eyes? So that would be employer group coverage with 20 or more employees. So this distinction here in this scenario would be somebody 65 or older. They have a group health plan from their current employment, and their employer has over 20 employees. So who pays first in that scenario? Well, the answer is the group health plan pays first, and Medicare is going to be secondary. Okay. Now, if somebody's not retiring, they're going to keep working, they're still going to be on their large group coverage. They may not even need to sign up for original Medicare. So a couple scenarios where you don't want to sign up for original Medicare. Let's say you have an employer group plan and it's HSA compatible. So we cover that in another video. You don't want to sign up for Medicare Part A if you're making contributions towards an HSA with an employer group plan, because you can lose the tax benefit of doing so. So in that case, you would not want to sign up for Part A if you have employer group coverage. You're never really going to want to sign up for Part B in that scenario too, because you're just paying an extra premium there for no reason. And Part B would be secondary. And again, the minimum Part B premium this year is $185. So, and you could also be subject to income related monthly adjustment amounts if you have a higher income. So it's very unlikely that it would make sense to sign up for Part B. There is a caveat. There's a situation where, let's say you have large group employer coverage, and it could make sense to sign up for Part A if you have a high deductible that's not an HSA compatible plan. So I'll explain what that means. Let's say you have a $5,000 deductible through your employer. It's not HSA compatible, and you've worked 10 years, paid into Medicare tax for 10 years or 40 quarters. Then it would make sense to sign up for Part A, because Part A would be secondary. You wouldn't have a premium for Part A, and you would just pay that Part A deductible if there was a hospitalization, which is around $1,682. So you go to the hospital, you're not going to be subject to that $5,000 in that sense. You're just going to pay up to the Part A deductible. Medicare would then pay the rest. In essence, there you could reduce your deductible by slightly over $4,300. Excuse me, that's $3,300 in that scenario. Okay, so it's a little deep in the weeds, but big picture, employer group coverage, more than 20 employees, the employer plan is primary payer. It's unlikely you'll need to sign up for Medicare as a secondary. Okay. The third scenario here, you have employer group coverage, but it's considered small employer coverage. So small employer coverage is going to be employer group plan under 20 employees. Okay, so who's going to pay first? In that scenario, Medicare is going to pay first, and the group plan would pay second. A lot of folks in this scenario, it actually often makes sense to get private insurance that's either secondary to Medicare, like a supplement, or an advantage plan that would take over from Medicare as a primary payer, because you're already going to have to pay for original Medicare Parts A and B, right? A lot of times the employer coverage might be, let's say the employee's paying 50% of the cost. it's very likely that private insurance is going to be cheaper at that point. Okay. But again, you have to sign up for Original Medicare if you have an employer group plan with 20 or fewer employees. If you keep the group plan is going to be secondary. Okay. A lot of times people kind of ignore those notices, but you have trouble with claims. And more importantly, you would lose your initial coverage election period if you didn't sign up for Original Medicare when you were first eligible. So what that means basically is you could not have the options open to you when you retire because you may have missed that original election period. So then you'd have to wait for general enrollment periods. So that's an important one. Employer group plan, 20 or fewer employees. Okay. Fourth scenario, large employer, you're under 65 and you're disabled. So if you're under 65, you're disabled and you have Medicare, if the employer has 100 or more employees, who is going to pay first in that scenario? Well, the employer group plan would pay first, Medicare pays second. So under 65, disabled, enrolled in Medicare, that large employer group plan, the distinction is 100 employees. Okay. So what matters if you're over or under 65, disabled or not disabled. Okay. Now, if we do small employer, right? What's considered a small employer when you're under 65 and you're on disability? That number changes to 100 employees, right? So if you have that small employer who's going to pay first, Medicare pays first, and the group plan would pay second in that scenario. Okay. So six, end-stage renal disease. So people can obviously, they can qualify for Original Medicare. If they're disabled, they've been on Medicare disability for 24 months, or they have end-stage renal disease. These are situations where you can qualify for Medicare when you're not yet 65. So how this works with Medicare and other group plans, when you have ESRD, the group health plan is going to pay first for the first 30 months, and then Medicare is going to pay first after the first 30 months. Okay. So they switch. Now, another one that comes up a lot is TRICARE. So if you have TRICARE and Medicare, who's going to pay first? So in that scenario, Medicare is going to pay first. TRICARE is going to be secondary. And again, there is different scenarios where it may or may not make sense to get Original Medicare. Okay. If you're on, now this does change. Like if you're on active duty, of course, then Medicare will not pay first. Okay, Medicaid. So you have Medicare and Medicaid. So Medicaid's always going to pay last. And why I say Medicaid's always going to pay last is because you can have Medicare, you can have Medicaid, and you can have what they call a dual eligible plan, which works like an Advantage plan, but it's for beneficiaries that are enrolled in Medicare and Medicaid. So an important distinction that we didn't touch on with the employer coverage that we should go back to is COBRA. Okay. So with COBRA, it's important to know that like if you're turning 65, you're retiring and you have COBRA, Medicare would pay primary, COBRA would be secondary. But what also happens is you lose your open enrollment for your initial coverage election period for getting Part B when you turn 65 and a Advantage plan because COBRA is not necessarily considered credible. So let's say 8 months go by, you're like, well, I don't want to get 9 months go by. I don't want this COBRA anymore. I want to sign up for a Medicare Advantage plan or a Medicare supplement. We have lost your ICEP right, your initial coverage election period, or your open enrollment right to get a Medicare supplement plan. And if you didn't sign up for Part B when you first became eligible at 65 and you have COBRA because you thought maybe you didn't need it, well, then you're going to have to wait to the general enrollment period to get Part B. And in addition to that, the Part B late enrollment penalty would apply. Okay, so as a general rule, you're on Medicare, you have the option of COBRA. It's highly unlikely it's going to make sense to do that. Okay, so these are just a few scenarios that come up most frequently for folks that are on Medicare and have other coverage. These are important things to keep in mind when you're trying to decide, what do I do? Do I even need to enroll in original Medicare? So if you thought this was helpful, we do have a video that talks about Part A and other coverage. You can watch that one here as well. So thanks for tuning in.